Hi everyone, it's Annas. In today's video, I'm going to explain how to stitch the design of Easter eggs and bunnies. This is a design in my book called Annas Animal Embroidery. I'm going to do only the rabbit. I'm going to embroider it from start to end. So let's get started. I'm going to trace the design. Trace only black lines. You don't need to trace blue lines, they are directional lines. Some people prefer to trace them because they remind them about the direction of their stitch. No need to trace the eye since I'm going to stitch it after filling here. Put it on an embroidery hoop. Place the square to the top. Let's start from the ear. It says number 1 ear. To start my thread, take a couple of running stitches and go back. It can be anywhere as long as on this line of the thread. It's anchored. Trim the excess thread. Stitch the ear by coming up and going down the previous stitch. I recommend that you stitch the parts that aren't overlapped first. So start from the ear. I'm stitching the ear and the tail first. Have a directional stitch and fill in the area by coming up and going down to the previous stitch. I've done to the top. Then I'm stitching to the bottom in the same way. I've done the ear. Weave the thread through the stitches in the back twice. Make sure not to be seen to the front. Then trim off the excess thread. Next, I'm going to change thread. Use white one. To start my thread, weave it through the stitches in the back from this time. Next part is the tail. You can carry your thread across the back of your work. I'm going to fill in the body later and it'll be buried in. The body is stitched horizontally. I have to stitch here diagonally. I stitch it here too horizontally. If the angle of stitching is equal, each part will be linked connecting. Make it diagonally at an angle of 45 degrees. Have a directional stitch filling the half and the other half. I've done the tail. Next, I'm filling the body by coming up and going down to the previous stitch. But the width is too wide for one stitch. I believe I should use long and short stitch if it's longer than 1 centimeter. So I'm going to fill in this big area with long and short stitch. For the first row, work the stitch alternating between long and short. And also follow the guideline to one side. Then I'm going to make zigzag line at the place where stitches will overlap later, so it's totally okay to stitch short and short, long and long, or whatever. You can also make the middle length stitch. Try to fill in the area up to the top and down to the bottom like this. Make a zigzag line at the place where stitches will overlap, but if the length is short enough to do satin stitch, I'm working with satin stitch. When you do this, it's easier to work your needle from outside to inside. The reason is, it's difficult to immerse the needle right where I want to start the next stitch. I should go dive into the same hole. It's easier to do from the front. You tend to come up to a different place from the back, so I'm going to do stitching from outside to inside. I've come this far, then I'm going to use satin stitch. But you still need to use long and short stitch a little. I'm wondering if I can work with satin stitch. Sometimes I work with satin stitch for this length. I'm going to fill in the upper head with satin stitch. You might make too much stitches when you try to make a head round. It'll make it sharp. Don't stitch too much. From this area, as I said earlier, it's easier to stitch from outside to inside. So like this way. These areas should be stitched in the same angle since they're the parts of one face. You can go upward from here, but it's a little bit hard to do, so I'm going to have a directional stitch fill in the half and the other half. As for animal designs, any piece of them will look lovely, so don't be afraid of stitching. I'm going to fill in the rest of it. Then I'm going to start stitching with long and short stitch. Take your needle in on this horizontal line. I couldn't do it well. I'll do it again. I want to make this line, so go down around here. You can come up this side or the other one. You can come up the side easier for you to stitch, but you should consider this side is going to overlap while you're stitching, So make it zigzag way to avoid having a gap. Make a longer stitch and then a shorter one. For the first row, I'm going to stitch literally zigzag way, but after the second row, make a stitch like filling a gap. It'll make the entire part smooth. My thread is getting short. Weave through the back. Then stitch the eye. Put the embroidery hoop on the table to be able to use both hands. I'm going to wrap the thread around the needle once. If you take your needle in the same hole, it'll be buried, so take it above a little. Draw the needle through and take it to the back. Now I've done the eye, like this. Weave through the back again. And trim the thread. Then dissolve the design. You can wet it by spraying water on it. Then just leave it to dry naturally or dry it with an iron. I've done. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.